This is what we do, what we call our main talk for the day. It's a little bit longer than the community moment, and we talk about like every aspect of life. It's just amazing how much there is to talk about when you're no longer limited to one book. And this is so we do. It's true. Yeah, we have talks on science, on the arts, literature, life itself. Sometimes we have guest speakers from outside the community. A lot of times we have people from inside the community. Today is one of those days when we have one of our own Oasins doing the main talk. He's well known to this community as one of our kind of chief sound engineer and a supporter in so many ways. Let's welcome, as our main talk presenter today, Fred Thompson.
May not be very good, but the sound will really be great. And thank you, Keith. That was a great introduction. What was that? Good dream, bad dream, they're all the same to me. That's what life was meant to be. Where will this lead me when I can't find a way? How can I turn to you? You always turn away. We are a community of compassion and reason. What this means to me personally is something I read recently that somebody had written about Sunday morning communities. It said, we seek together as a community to live richer, fuller, more meaningful lives informed by reason, infused with compassion, and guided by hope for the future of humankind. As individuals, now these are my words, as individuals, we feel compassion for people who are suffering. And as a community, we act on those feelings of compassion. We don't just sympathize. We come together and we actually do something to make a difference, because meaning comes from making a difference. I know we are a community of compassion, not because it's printed on that vinyl poster up there, but because it's a verifiable fact. I've seen how we're helping others in the Houston area. We organize blood drives, we work at the Houston Food Bank, the Exploration Green Tree Nursery, Atheist Helping the Homeless, several other charitable activities. Yesterday, we had a presence at the Pride celebration. We are making a difference. A few months ago, I did a community moment on the benefits of belonging to a church or to a secular community like Houston Oasis. The message of that community moment was that religion has been successful because it satisfies some important human needs. And one of the needs I mentioned was our need for support. Each of us needs a circle of friends who will be there for us when we need their help. I realized how important this is. This was last April when two friends' husbands died in the same week. One, my across the street neighbor called me to tell me that her husband was dying, and he died 2 days later. The other, somebody that does some contract work occasionally, I sent her an email saying, can you work for me Friday? She said, no, my husband's dying. I mean, he's really dying. I don't expect him to live more than a couple of days. And he died the next night. And it occurred to me that I had not the slightest idea what I should do or say. I was absolutely clueless. Of course, I did the I'm so sorry, what can I do, which is pretty useless in that situation. I realized I'm not very good at that situation, so I did an online search. Oh, by the way, my wife was out of town that week. She is very good at that. I'm not. And I found some ideas about what you should do or what you can do when you learn that a friend is going through a difficult time. And that's my topic for today, being a compassionate and supportive community. I'd like to start, and I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I'd like to start with the concept of community itself, because community has changed a lot over the 200,000 years we've been around here with our present brain size and such. For the first roughly 190,000 of those years, which is most of that time, we lived in very small hunter-gatherer tribes, never more than a few dozen people, often fewer. And then about 12, and we continue to live that way today. We would all be in small hunter-gatherer tribes, and there'd probably be a few thousand of us on the earth instead of a few billion. But about 12,000 years ago, we invented agriculture that enabled people to specialize, and some people moved to what we now call towns and cities. So people living in cities over time recognized they weren't part of the tribe anymore, but they had their extended family around, because until about 500 years ago, nobody ever moved, almost nobody, ever moved more than 10 or 20 miles from their place of birth. So you had your extended family around you, and of course you had a few friends, and nothing changed very much other than people were born, they lived their life, and they died, all in the same place. And then things really changed with the Industrial Revolution, because people found the jobs were available in cities where they knew nobody. So they moved to cities, and then we had a couple of world wars, and we had the GI Bill, and many men, and I'm saying men because women weren't included in this, but men who in the past could not have afforded it could get a college degree. And again, they found after they got their college degree that the jobs were not in their hometown of Marfa, Texas, or Breaux Bridge, Louisiana, but in big cities like Houston and New Orleans. And so here we find ourselves, all of us in the big city, and most of us don't have an extended family around us. So where do we find community? Where do we find a group that is going to be the people who will be there for us when we need their help? Well, when you move to a city, one of the first things you find is there are lots of churches. And I may not like everything about churches, but I have to admit churches, especially some churches, are very good at providing support to their members. I got my MBA degree in 1969, and between 1969 and 1978, I moved from Baton Rouge to Lafayette to New Orleans to Texas City to Chicago to Houston. All transfers with the company I went to work for. And we had a problem. My wife had a serious life-threatening heart condition. And I had to drive her to the ER. And it was really, really good to have church friends who I knew I could call at any hour of the night to say, come get the kids, I have to take Linda to the ER. Well, we ended up in Houston. Linda's family's nearby. We belonged to a few churches, but church lost its meaning for me. And I was unchurched for many years, but we had developed a circle of friends, and that all worked fine. And then I discovered Oasis about, 2.5 years ago, and I wasn't a founder. I only came to the second meeting, but I've been here ever since. As I mentioned before, we're making a difference with our support of the needs of others in the community. But these things are relatively easy to do comparing to supporting each other. Let's think about it. If we have a blood drive, or we're working the funeral home, the Houston Blood Bank, whatever. Somebody plans an event, tells us where to be and when to be there. We arrive, we receive any needed training and orientation. We do our assigned task, and when we're done, we leave. In contrast to these highly organized events, our friends' crises don't happen on schedule. And when they do happen, we may not know what to do, like me in the situation I mentioned. I know we all agree we want to be a supportive community, but exactly what does that look like? How does being supportive play out in real life and not just our imaginations? What are we doing when we're being supportive? What should we not be doing? These are some of the questions I want to explore in today's message. When I think about the term being a supportive community, my mind goes first to those most critical life events, such as a painful divorce or a serious illness, or even the death of a close friend or a loved one. Of course, I place these very high on any priority list, but I also see us as a supportive community for a broader range of needs, the same way our extended families were supportive back in time when we had the luxury of having a large extended family nearby. Houston Oasis can never replace the nurturing influence of a loving parent or an understanding uncle or aunt, but I think we can be an effective substitute in many situations. So I'd like to start by taking a look at some of the kinds of support needs our fellow Oasians might have. as I go through this list, I have a request for anybody who has experienced any of these situations or any other crisis situation within the past few years. Think back to when you were in this situation. What did other people do that helped? What did they do that wasn't really very helpful? I'd like to talk about a range of situations, and I'd like to plot them on this. This is emotional intensity. From low emotional intensity to high emotional intensity, this is time, from a short period to a long time period. And I'm going to start with one that is right down here. And here's where I am. So here's the first one. Does anybody have a truck? I just moved to Houston. I don't have a lot of money. I found an apartment. It's bare. I went down to Goodwill and I found a sofa that'll work. Only problem is they want $90 to move into my apartment. I don't have that $90. Does anybody have a truck? Can somebody help me move the sofa? Very simple request. That is something we can do. Somebody around here must have a truck. When I used to have a truck, I don't have one anymore, but I would have been happy to help anyone. In fact, if you want to be popular, buy a truck. Let's go on to one that is short term, but it has a bit more emotional intensity. My damn kids are driving me crazy. We all love our children. Mine are in their 40s now, but even when they were little guys, I loved them dearly. But there were times when I wanted to wring their necks. But hey, I was away at work most of the time. My wife was a stay-at-home mom at the time, and I know anyone here ever have days like this where your kids are driving you crazy? Show of hands. Yeah, okay. Okay. We can be supportive in that situation. And again, I'm going to ask her some examples of things we can do. Let's go on to one that is a middle emotional intensity, but it lasts a very long time. A chronic medical condition. Oh, it can be you or one of your children is on the autism spectrum. You can have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome. I can think of all sorts of things. You're going to live with it forever, and it's very upsetting, and it's very debilitating. And like I said, you're going to be there the rest of your life. Okay, let's go on to another one, and I won't track this one. You can decide where it's fit. And that's clinical depression. Somebody who's suffering from clinical depression. And wasn't it 10% of people, I think, suffer from clinical depression at one time or another in their life? So there are a few people in this room that to some degree are having that problem right now. And how can we help them? Okay, here we go to one. We're getting up here now. Pretty high emotional content. Oh, I'm sorry, it didn't go there. It goes out here. It's going to last a while. And that one is a divorce, or the breakup of any loving relationship. Extremely painful, just awful. Everybody, how many people here have gone through a divorce? Okay, how many people have gone through the breakup of a loving relationship, even if you weren't, whoa, the hands really come up, so you know what I'm talking about. Okay, we're going to another one. It's getting high. Oops, missed it again, pretty high. And it's kind of medium term, and that's a serious illness. And then I'm going to go to the one that's way out here. It's gonna hurt for a long time, and it's going to hurt really badly. And that's the death of a friend or loved one. So those are the kinds of situations that I'm talking about. And as I said, I did some research on when somebody is going through a difficult period, what do you do? I didn't have a clue, and I found some very interesting things. In fact, one of the best sources I found of all places in the March issue of my wife's church's bulletin. She's a member of St. Martin's Episcopal Church, 9,000 members. They fill a 1,500 seek sanctuary 3 times on Sunday. It's a very interesting place, and while I may have some problems with churches, remember, they are very good at some things, and one of those things is helping their fellow members. So, how to respond? And these are just a few ideas. Most of these came from this article, and I thought they might be helpful. First of all, don't judge the person who's grieving. Oh, I don't want to get in front of that speaker. Grief can make you batshit crazy. And when people are grieving, they're not going to be rational. That's just the way it is. The person I was talking about whose husband died, I've seen her 4 or 5 times since then. And every time I ask her, well, how are things going? And she goes in great detail through the story of exactly how he died, how his heart was beating, and she was holding him. And it's a really sad story. She tells it to me every time. And you know, there's a rational part of me that says, do I need to hear this again? Because it's a bit uncomfortable. But you see, there's a part of her that needs to tell that story because she's processing her way through it. And when people go through a grief situation, they have to process their way through it. Second, don't try to fix things. You can't fix it for them. They're going to have to work through it on their own. You just need to be there. I see too many situations where somebody has a problem. I'll give you an example. My wife came home once and she had had a terrible day at the office. Her boss had yelled at her about something she didn't do. The jerk in the office excelled at being a jerk that day. And on the way home, somebody decided to play bumper cars, so it took her an extra 20 minutes to get home. And at the last turn, somebody cut her off and gave her an ugly finger gesture. She was livid when she got home, and she just talked and talked and talked. And the rational part of me wanted to say, babe, is there anything you want to tell me that you haven't already said 3 times? But I didn't want to sleep alone that night, so I didn't say that. I just listened. Next item is, keep your antenna extended. People won't always tell you when they're going through a difficult time. Some of us are very private. I've never told you guys, but since I joined Oasis, my wife has had 3 surgeries, 1 cardiac cath, and 1, what is it called? Synchronized electrical cardioversion. That's where they do this, only they don't do it that way. It's all controlled by a computer, and it's pretty safe, you know, but she says it's like someone hit you in the chest with a red-hot sledgehammer. This is private, and I usually don't say this to people, but so anyway, I just want you to be aware, everybody doesn't tell you everything, so keep your antenna extended. Remember, no good deed goes unpunished. When people are going through a stressful situation, which would include death, divorce, any of those kinds of things that involve a loss, they are fluctuating between sadness, anger, and all sorts of things, and that anger can flare up all of a sudden, telling you, and you may find that you are collateral damage, even though you're trying to help. Suddenly they're angry at you and they're yelling at you. I can give you an example for a few weeks ago. This involves the old lady with all the cats. She got a little water in her house, so Luke Cana and I went over to help tear out carpeting, and you got to picture this. 2 old guys in their 70s, and we're ripping carpeting and rolling it up, and the 3 of us are carrying it out, and we're finally done. And Lou and I sit on the bed under the fan, and when we're finally done, Catherine says, well, I've learned something today. Best Buy has their Geek Squad, and Houston Oasis has their Geezer Squad. Now, of course, I'm joking. We didn't take offense at that. We thought it was funny. But you will become, it's almost guaranteed, if you try to help people who are under great stress, you will become the object of their aggression. Oh. And the next one is just shut up and listen. Sometimes people, they just need to talk about it. That's the way we process through grief. We talk about it. And it's better if they talk about it than if they keep it to themselves. So you just need to listen and not try to fix it and do other things like that. Be available. A grieving person needs friends. They will not come looking for you. You have to make sure that you're available and visible to them. And when you offer help, make it specific. I'm so sorry, what can I do is absolutely useless. They don't know what you can do. They're in the middle of a grief process. If you know something that you can do, then you should offer it. And there are some things you can do that you don't even have to offer. For example, if there's a death in a family and the yard needs mowing, there's absolutely nothing wrong with going over and mowing their lawn for them. They will appreciate it. This next one is very important for people who have lost someone. Be sure to include them in activities. And probably their initial response will be, no, I'm just not ready for that. And that's fine. If they're not ready, they know they're not ready. But eventually, they will say, okay, I have a friend whose wife died a couple of years, I think it's 3 years ago now. And for the first few months, he wouldn't do anything with us. And I finally got him to come to the Hops house for some music. And he came and he stayed 10 minutes and he left. Okay, today, he met somebody at one of my house concerts, by the way, and they're in a wonderful relationship, and this is 3 years later, and he's very happy again. But I had to get him out to do some things, even though he didn't think he was ready. This next one is tricky. Be mindful of the importance of self-esteem. And self-esteem comes under two categories. One is a sense of competence, and the other is a sense of worthiness. And a person with healthy self-esteem will say, I am a competent person. I can do the things that life requires, the normal things that life requires, that I know I need to do to move on. For example, if their spouse has died, I can get through all this paperwork, I can get on top of the bills, all of those kinds of things. I can, if I have to, somehow I'll manage to find a job. I can do those things. The other one is a sense of self-worth, and this is really important where people have been in abusive relationships. I have a former employee and very good friend who was in an emotionally and not physically abusive relationship for all the years that she worked for me. And she would tell me sometime how this jerk would always make a point of telling her how stupid she was and how she couldn't do anything right. And then she had a son, and she realized, I don't want my son growing up in this environment. She had been working on her college degree. She got her college degree, she threw his ass out, divorced him, and she's been raising her son ever since, and she's got all her self-confidence back now. It's just amazing. She's also progressed from being an administrative assistant to she's now a human resources manager, and she drives a Lexus. Not that you go, girl. Always respect their privacy. People will tell you things when they're grieving that they normally wouldn't tell you. When I was 15, my maternal grandfather died, and my grandmother was an old school Southern belle who had never done anything. She had never worked outside the house. She had never written a check. She had never driven a car. And I got the privilege of teaching her how to drive. Now, I was 15, but in Louisiana, back in the swamp country, the legal driving age was 15 back then. So we'd go out in the back road and she'd drive and she'd talk. And she told me about how she loved my grandfather, but he had all those other women. I'm 15, and back then at 15, you were really naive. This was totally inappropriate, but she was grieving and she didn't recognize it. I never told anybody until today about what she told me. It just wasn't anybody's business but hers. And finally, remember, life for people who have suffered a severe loss will never be normal again. Psychological research suggests that even when people have lost a loved one, in about 2 years they'll be as happy as unhappy as they were before, but it'll never be the same again. So going back to the situations that I talked about earlier, what I'd like to do now is ask people who have been in those situations in the past or in that situation now, if you could tell us what could Oasis do that would be helpful to you. And let's just start with a chronic condition. It could be you or one of your children is on the autism spectrum, just anything like that. Does anybody want to tell me? Don't be shy, I'm relying on you.
Why don't and for this portion, why don't we pass the mic around so people can hear? Are you okay with using that one? Okay, well, Michelle.
I thought maybe for the friend who's moving furniture and they put a request out online, you know, does anybody have a truck? Does anybody have a truck? Maybe you do, maybe you can't, you know, get it to them in time or whatnot. You can offer money to rent a truck from Lowe's or Home Depot, 20 bucks a day with a bit of a deposit. So that 20 bucks that you donated can help them get a truck to move their items.
Good idea. Good idea.
Oh, what you ask about? I've been to many of these things. But one of the things that we've had issues with have been differences like autism and other things that have been in our family. And it isn't always, sometimes one of the things that I wish that Oasis had been around when my kids were little was that I really struggled to find resources. And I feel like sometimes just having a community of people that you can ask, does anybody know a good therapist or have this situation and can share their experience. But also the acceptance of that difference is critically important, and to understand that sometimes it's a struggle, and when kids are little, it isn't just that your kids are driving you crazy, but that they may really be driving you crazy. There's an extra stress to it, and there are sometimes issues with sleep, and so you become sleep deprived with some kids who have one thing and another. And an offer to help or organizing an activity that you know that kids with differences can participate in is really critical.
Great. Go ahead and, would you pass the mic to TC and then I'll go around?
By the way, if your kids are driving you crazy, just the normal, my kids are driving me crazy, we do have a partial antidote to that. It's called Family Friendly Happy Hour, and you can share your misery with other parents.
Misery loves company, doesn't it? Yeah. One of the things that I know in my role as a traveling person, and Fred has done this for me, and it's simple, he's taken me to the airport. And if I didn't have Fred to do that favor for me, it would be 80 bucks each way with a taxi. Or I could park my car at the airport and pay 8 bucks a day for the month I'm gonna be gone, right? So it was a material boost to me to have that, and I would return a favor like that any day, and or pay it forward to someone else. So if you could get a deed done, pay it forward. That's how you know who your friends are.
I'm being pointed at. I have trouble coming up with exact solutions to things, but certainly I like Mary Angel's idea of things that like that families are welcome to, that kids are welcome to. I obviously, many of you have heard online, have the issue of our children that are a little difficult. One's on the autism spectrum, I'm on the autism spectrum. And I've had a lot of issues in the past, not so bad now, I'm getting good now, but past with isolation, not having things I can go to because I've always got the kids. I was a single mum for a period there after I separated, and just the isolation during that period was incredible, and just having people invite you over and make their house so the kids can't quite destroy it or create events that the kids I know that's just one needs group, but that I can think back to a time when I was crazily isolated because of those reasons, because of my own difficulties making friends. I can think of a time when I first came to Oasis, it was because I was so isolated, and I remember a period where I was having relationship difficulties and walked away from someone and was very depressed. At that point I still had chronic depression. I since got on meds, but at that point I was still really struggling, and I remember coming to the Norris Centre one day because I thought I'll go to Oasis anyway. I'm in tears, I can't handle things, but I've got the kids, I can't handle them at home either. I'll bring them into childcare. And I remember coming in one day and I was sort of in tears, and I was looking around for someone to talk to. I felt like I'm coming in because I need anyone to talk to. And I remember realising this is awkward. I think one or two people caught that I was crying, but they sort of walked away, and I realised I didn't know anyone well enough at that point. So I remember going down that hallway in the Norris Centre and sitting and crying while my kids were in childcare, just so that I could let go of them and break down for a second, because I had to be okay when I was with them, and I had to pick them up and be with them. And I don't know what the cure for that is, but just, I don't know, awareness of people around you, inclusion, inviting those who, who can't join in the normal activities. And I'm fine now. If anyone's worried, this was a long time back before I knew everyone, and yeah, I've been in a lot better state recently. But before you knew me. But there are, yeah, okay. I won't hold the microphone.
One more, and then I want to make a
Yeah, we have one more.
I was going to say, whether you have difficulty or not with stuff, a lot of times people do have difficulty meeting people and getting out there, especially if you're dealing with any form of depression or just shyness or anything. So, you might come to events like this or something, and you'll sit in your chair and you don't really interact with people. So if you're wandering around, you see someone sitting around, just walk up, say hi to them. I've found that many times friends including me in their circles of friends, and when their friends are getting together, going to an event or something, including me into that, and it helps me expand my window of circle of friends. And so that inclusion helps people, especially because a lot of times when you're shy and stuff, it's just hard to get to know people.
Well, the time we spent here today will be worthwhile if several things happen. One, we all agree when we find somebody's in need, we're going to be here for them. And we're going to be here over the long haul. We're going to do what it takes. The second thing, we all need to understand when people are going through a grief situation, they're not always pleasant. Kids who are on the autism spectrum aren't always as much fun as kids who aren't, and you may find them annoying sometime. And I think the true test of our character as an organization, as a community, I should say, is whether we can get over that and be there for them, even though from time to time we find them a bit annoying. Because if we can do that and we get to know them, we'll probably find we really like them once we know them on their terms instead of ours. So I hope this has been useful for you, and I hope something good comes out of it. Thank you.